Essentially, the vegan ideology can be used as a vehicle to usher in globalism and globalist policies. Now, as innocent as veganism may seem, if you actually scratch the surface, the more you'll find when you start questioning vegans and their lifestyle, it's a lot bigger than just a diet. It's actually an ideology, and to some degree, it's a cult. Most vegans that I've talked to actually acknowledge the fact that they could not live and sustain a vegan diet if it weren't for global trade and the fact that they have access to fruits and vegetables that are produced on other continents.
I would also say that's irrelevant. It doesn't matter what life they give, and they're still going to be slaughtered. And I'd ask you, how do you justify taking their life if it's unnecessary?
Well, what I would say is, how do you justify banning meat across the whole population? Are you talking about banning meat in America or globally?
What we're asking is, we're not asking about banning something, we're asking people to make more conscious and ethical choices, which is reducing their consumption and eliminate their consumption themselves. It's not about us banning something, because we realise it's probably very impossible to ban something, but if we encourage people to stop their consumption, then naturally the amount that's raised and produced will be dropped until it's no longer relevant in society.
Let me ask you, what moral code are you using to say that it's wrong to kill animals for meat?
The same moral code that we have towards each other, which is that we're alive, that we suffer, that we have pain, and that we want to live. And because of that, we realise that we shouldn't harm each other. Now, the animals are alive, they're sentient, they're conscious, they can feel pain, they can suffer just like us, which is why I use the same moral code, which is just let them live if we can, which of course we can.
So, would you say that you're using the same code when you say that we shouldn't kill each other, to apply that to not killing animals?
I think it's not necessarily about it being the same code, it's just the fact that we don't have to do these things, and because we don't have to, there's no moral justification for it because it's unnecessary. So it doesn't matter what species the form takes, if we don't have to, then we shouldn't, you know.
So let's talk about, you know, the plan and aspect of if you were to try to move toward a veganism diet for the entire global population.
Right.
How would that be sustainable? And, you know, as far as what we've seen regarding agriculture use and with plants, vegetables, crops, and everything like that, are you aware that the amount of arid land, farmable land that we have in this country couldn't necessarily sustain everyone in the world having a vegan diet?
But that's not actually true, because the majority of the crops that we grow, we feed to livestock animals that it is. And in fact, all the grain that's used in this country alone could feed 800 million humans, which means we could eradicate world hunger with just the grain that's fed to animals in this country alone. Well, it's the single biggest thing, or the single smallest thing we can do that has the biggest impact, is going vegan. And all these other issues we do have to address, single-use plastic, greenhouse gas emissions from other sources, absolutely, crude oil use. But it's such a pivotal and significant thing that we can do that will have such a huge impact.
So, did you know that it's estimated that around 300 animals, that includes groundhogs, rodents, birds, animals in the wild or in agricultural settings, are killed per 1 acre of agriculturally farmed land that is for vegetable production. So around 300 animals are killed when you do a farm agriculturally per acre. That's actually more than per acre of animals that are killed with cattle grazed land, with cattle farmed land. So to say that you're not participating in the killing of animals is unrealistic to think that we're not playing any role, regardless if you eat vegan or regardless if you eat meat.
And I wholeheartedly agree with you. Like, I'm the first to admit, if you ask me, that small animals like rodents and small birds and stuff die in the production of crops. That's an unfortunate situation they're in. But for the most part, if you think about it, it takes up to 16 kilograms of plants to produce 1 kilogram of animal products, which means that vastly more plants are used in the production of animal products, which means that vastly more acres of land are used in the production of animal products, which means that vastly more small animals like rodents and little birds and mice and stuff are killed in the production of animal products generally. So even as a vegan, I know I am responsible for those animals being killed on some level, but the fact is it's still less animals, and it's about that intentional killing. When we go into a supermarket, we buy steak, bacon, eggs, dairy, whatever it is, we're consciously and intentionally paying for an animal to die on our behalf when we don't have to. We have to eat something, and we have to eat plants.
Okay, so what's your plan? Okay, you guys say you want to shut down farms like this that have cattle and pigs and chickens.
And what we do, we use our profits to support the Lord's work.
What happens to those animals? You do realize that those animals have been bred in a certain way to be used for us domestically. The chicken today is nothing like the original fowl that we took from the forest and bred and made fatter and bigger and less capable of escaping from predators. actually think a chicken will last in a wild if you just released it.
They won't, but the thing is, right, as the world shifts to veganism, it will be a gradual shift, which means that the number of animals that we breed will obviously reduce accordingly as the number of vegans rises, because farmers aren't going to breed animals they know they can't sell.
So the animals will just disappear.
Right, well, so the animals that we breed, the ones that, as you rightfully admitted yourself, are natural animals who can't survive without our help, will disappear. But what that will allow is for this farmland that we have now to repopulate, for those natural ecosystems to replenish, which will allow natural wildlife to restock in those natural areas. We can have wild roaming deer, wild roaming boar, wild roaming, all the birds and everything that are on the brink of extinction can come back in these land areas that we decimated for agriculture. So the animals that we bred unfairly and disgustingly to die at 6 weeks old.
But if you're going to create more agriculture, how are you going to then not... Like, what you're saying is, okay, we decimated those lands for agriculture, to feed animals, right?
Yeah.
But we also would need to create more land for agriculture if we're having to feed humans without meat, because currently we do rely on a large portion of our diet for meat. You know that. Americans mostly eat meat. So we would actually have to mow down way more animal habitat in order to feed ourselves.
But like I said before, we're currently growing enough food to feed between 10 and 12 billion people globally, and the grain alone in this country, America, that we feed to livestock animals could feed 800 million other humans, which is just about the number of people that are living in a state of starvation. So actually, it's not true we could use less land, and we're already growing enough crops because cows and pigs eat way more food than we eat on a daily basis.
Well, the grain, like I said before, you can't live off the grain.
Right, but the wheat,
humans
and the corn
aren't even meant
soy.
to eat that much grain. It's very unhealthy for ourselves.
Yeah,
so you would have to look into what types of, you'd have to have a balanced diet, and like I said, a lot of that comes from tropical regions. A lot of that stuff, the mangoes, papayas, bananas, and the impact that it would have on those areas would be pretty big, wouldn't you say?
But it doesn't have to come from those areas. Yeah, we're going to import some fruits and some vegetables and some grain stuff from those areas, which is good for the economy in many senses. But we don't have to produce all of our, or to get all of our fruits and vegetables from those areas. We can grow them here. So the places that we're currently growing all the wheat and the soy and the corn and the barley and the maize for animals, we can totally take that down and grow the foods that we want to eat instead there. Because the land is there, the farmers have that land, they can shift the agriculture.
That implies that all farmland is equal, and it's not.
It's
and
not.
There are areas where you can grow grain and corn, and you cannot grow other vegetables.
Absolutely.
And you would have to import tons and tons of different soil and amendments, and it's just not practical and not reasonable.
Right.
So to say that all farmland is equal is the problem.
I never said that all farmland was equal. I admit that many farmland is not equal, and some grains you can produce on some farmland and some you can't others. But like I said before, the shift to veganism is going to be gradual, so these little bumps in the road that we're discussing can be solved over a long period of time and sustainable. Yes, there are always going to be sustainability issues in the way that we live. We can never eradicate the sustainability issues that we have.
You know, research and studies have shown that actually the most sustainable and healthy for the environment and healthy for even humans diet is actually an omnivore diet, where you do have vegetables, plants, and you also do have meat. Now, we can both agree that most Americans do eat too much meat, but we have, our ancestors ate meat. They found it in their teeth. They found it in their surroundings. They have cave drawings of us hunting meat. They have the tools that we use for hunting meat. So our ancestors have always eaten meat. If you want to argue through science and say we evolved from monkeys, well, monkeys are omnivores. They eat meat. And as far as the idea that, okay, well, you can't use a tool to be considered an omnivore, that's not necessarily true, because there are tons of animals out there that use tools to hunt and tools to obtain prey or advantages.
That's fine. That's the thing is, right, like, just because our ancestors did something, why does that provide moral justification for what we do today? Our ancestors used to murder each other. They were very violent. So are we allowed to kill each other and be violent towards each other because our ancestors did? I mean, our morality is changing. As a species, we've evolved so much. We live in homes, we have cars, we fly in planes. Our ancestors never did that. So if you want to be purist in your logic like that, you should be living in a cave and squatting in the bushes to go to the toilet, right? But the fact is, we don't do those things anymore because we've changed as a species. Now, it's irrelevant. Say we're biological omnivores, right? Irrelevant. Just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should. Now, we've evolved again so far.
But isn't it healthiest for us to do something that we've been doing for so long, and that is in our history of our ancestors? And it's scientifically, if we're omnivores, we are opportunists. We're supposed to eat what we can get a hold of, and to have a diet that varies in different things, where we can get nutrients and fats and things from different sources.
So our bodies thrive on a plant-based diet. You're right, we're opportunistic in the sense that we eat what we have to survive. And what we had to survive back in the Ice Ages, when those times of food scarcity, was animals, of course. But we don't live in those times of food scarcity anymore, so we don't need to be opportunistic omnivores.
Because we have globalism and we have shipping. But let me ask you this.
We can farm crops like we do animals.
But let me ask you this.
Please.
Could you if you had however many acreage of land for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Without any animals,
Right.
no animal fertilizer, no nothing, right?
Yeah.
Could you plant and grow outside crops
Right.
and sustain yourself throughout the cycles of the year, only
Right.
growing native or localized seasonable crops? Meaning no bananas, no mangoes, none of that stuff. That's not naturally grown here in Ohio.
Of course it's
You'd
not,
have
no.
to be living off of whatever's natural and can be grown in this environment,
Right.
and you'd have to only have the seasonal window that we have here.
Yeah.
If you actually were to sit there and examine that aspect here, you would realize that there's a reason why we ate meat, because we had winters. We didn't have refrigerators very much, so we couldn't, canning and storing wasn't as simple and easy as it is today.
Yeah. But the thing is, you said it's not as simple as it is today, right?
Yeah.
So it is simple today. We can live off different things. And to answer your question, I couldn't tell you what seasonal fruit and veg and if I could do it all year round, but I don't have to worry about that because we can sustainably live by getting foods from different parts of the country and from different states. So we can get avocados from California and take them to Cleveland, and that's fine. And we can do that sustainably as well.
So basically you admit that the entire premise of veganism is based on having globalization.
I mean,
globalism, essentially.
I mean, I know what InfoWars is like, and the topic of globalization is a scary word for you guys, and I appreciate that. But the issue of veganism is something that we would like to spread across the world just because it's a more compassionate and ethical way to live. Really, what would be the problem in doing that? Like I asked you before, what justification can we use to kill them if it's unnecessary? I mean, how do we morally justify taking their life?
Let's talk about, because you keep bringing up morals and ethics.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
You do. But first I want to ask you right now, do you believe that humans are animals, or do you believe that we are sentient beings from God?
We're animals. I mean, even if you believe in the Bible, we're still animals.
Okay.
I mean,
So you believe that we're animals and they're animals, and there's virtually no difference between them and us?
I do believe that there's many differences between us and animals, but I think that what makes us alike is what's most important. The fact that we are alive, the fact that we are conscious, and the fact that we can feel pain. That's what unites us, right?
Okay, because what's curious is, I know that you're saying morals, right?
Yeah.
Morals and ethics. It's wrong to kill. It's wrong to kill a living other being. And I know that some of you may try to say that, oh, well, this is just naturally learned, but we've seen in other societies that, no, not necessarily. That men have been killing men for a very long time. Men have been killing animals for a very long time. So where did we get these ethics and morals from? And what I will say is this: the majority of our ethics and morals that we have, at least in this country, right, and our Western civilization, is based on Judeo-Christian morals and principles. So if you're adhering and you're trying to use Christian morals and principles when you're talking about whether it's wrong or right to kill, but then also saying that you don't believe that we are from God and that we have certain consciousness abilities, how can you argue two separate points simultaneously that conflict with each other? That's
a good question. I believe that obviously morality in many senses is subjective in its purest form, although as humans we do have moral agency, and that's what kind of separates us from wild animals, although wild animals do demonstrate moral agency as well. Now let's put the issue of morality aside and let's look at social contracts, right? And we have a social contract with each other now not to harm each other. In fact, everyone in America for the most part has a social contract which means that we adhere to not harming each other.
It's not necessarily a social contract. I would say it's legal. It has to do with our judicial system, which predates back to Christian Judeo principles. Thou shalt not kill, that comes from Christian principles. The reason we have it in Western society is because we adopted that because we actually were founded by Christian people.
But
that's what we were founded by.
The legal system always changes, right? Which means that morality is always changing along with the legal system. And you know, people used to justify slavery using Christianity and the Bible, but of course we moved past that many years ago, thankfully, and realized that slavery is wrong, even though people use the Bible to justify something. So I think turning to religion or to a God to try and define how we should live is very dangerous because people use the religion and God in very manipulative and deceptive ways.
But people can try to use morals and ethics in very manipulative ways as well.
Agreed. But what's manipulative about saying let's not harm others if we don't have to?
Because if you had a situation where you had to feed your family, I guarantee you're going to choose to kill that animal and feed your children, would you not?
But you're taking a survival situation, a time of necessity, and I've not at one point argued it's immoral to kill an animal in necessity. Every time I've answered your question, it's saying it's wrong to kill an animal when it's unnecessary.
But that's why humans have been doing it for so long. It's because we've been doing it out of necessity, and it's what we needed to do to survive. We did it for health reasons. We did it to sustain ourselves. and to try and not acknowledge that would just be improper. And your whole argument that we can live on veganism is based on this new idea that we can have globalized agricultural systems, and it's really a huge feat and a big project, and it wouldn't be actually realistic or sustainable for many regions of the world.
You're absolutely right, and I'm not being improper because I agree with you, right, on that point. So, and the issues that you raise, again, it comes back to this idea of it's going to be a gradual shift to veganism. And look, there's going to be bumps in the road. I'm not saying it's going to be a smooth transition and going vegan is going to answer all the world's problems. I'm going to admit that to you, right, on that point. So, and the issues that you raise, again, it comes back to this idea of it's going to be a gradual shift to veganism. And look, there's going to be bumps in the road. I'm not saying it's going to be a smooth transition and going vegan is going to answer all the world's problems. I'm going to admit that to you. But being vegan is doing what's possible and practical, right? And that's why I use the word necessity.
I think veganism is a developed world luxury. You guys have the developed world luxury to live as vegans, but let's say this, people who are living in certain areas in Africa, you have tribes there that seriously live off of their cattle. They have cattle, and they have very respectful, loving relationships with their cattle. They milk them, they raise them, everything. They also use them and eat them for meat, and they're sacred to them. And in their areas, they do not have arable farmland. They could not live off of agricultural stuff. So them being able to exist and live would solely be based upon your globalist idea of farming all of the arable land, which would be most of Ohio would be turned into farms, okay? And then you'd have to ship it using tons of gasoline, which we can all talk about the environmental impact that would probably have to constantly shipping people food into other countries where they don't have arable land. And then the impact of what's that going to have to them as a community to all of a sudden switch from a heavily meat animal-based diet to then flip-flop to a vegan diet. Is that going to have an impact on their culture and on their society? So is it sustainable? I would say no, but I would say that it's a luxury that we have in this more developed world.
I would argue that point and say if you look at the poorest places in the world, you look at the places where people live in extreme poverty, the majority of what they eat is grains and plants because it's the cheapest food to produce. Now, of course, there's going to be areas in the world where people have cattle and they take the milk because they need to survive. It comes down to the idea of necessity.
A lot of the places in the world, the tribal people live off goats or sheep or cows.
And I'm not disputing that point, but the poorest country in the world, what they survive off mainly is a plant-based diet. Places in Africa like Nigeria and stuff like that, for example, they have some of the lowest rates of heart disease globally. And interestingly, they have the highest rates of plant consumption because they can't afford to have animals, they can't afford to look after animals, and they can't afford to buy animal products. So actually the luxury is animal products because they're the most expensive food that we can buy. And the only reason they're so cheap in this country is because of the massive amount of tax subsidies. If you actually looked at the proper price that these products should be, no one, apart from the richest upper echelons of society, will be able to afford them. If you want to talk about privilege, then it's privilege to be able to afford animal products, whereas the cheapest foods you can buy on this planet, the beans, grains, legumes, the seasonal vegetables and fruits, are the absolute cheapest foods that we can buy.
Well, if you want to talk about, the whole agricultural push to Africa is a newer thing. They have not been able to do agriculture, and they've been living off their animals and in their environment. And
growing what they can naturally.
And growing what they can naturally. To say that they've had big agriculture there for a long time is not necessarily true.
I've not said that. I just said they're growing what they can grow locally and what they can grow with the skills that they have. I've never said they have big agriculture. They just grow what they can afford to grow in that area.
But it's not, we can agree though, would we agree that a grain-based diet is not the healthiest diet for human?
Oh, it's better than an animal-based diet. Because animal products cause our leading diseases and illnesses: heart disease, colon cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, hypertension, strokes. These are caused.
But do they? I don't.
Oh, they do.
You don't. What are you citing in that? Because here's the reality: is our ancestors had been consuming heavy meat and fat and bone marrow-based diets when they were hunting a very long time ago. It's evidence, and their bones were more dense. They had stronger jaws. They were bigger. They were taller. As soon as humans, if you look at it historically, as soon as humans switched to agriculture, their bones became more brittle and they dropped about 6 inches in height, and our jaws became smaller and less strong. We have to have braces now because we have crooked teeth because our jaws are smaller. We have to have our wisdom teeth removed. Are we really healthier eating non-meat diets?
But I would argue the reason that happens is because we increased our consumption of animal products to such an extent. Now, animal products leach calcium from our bones because of the excess protein. So I'd actually argue that all these things that you just described is due to, as you say, the mass commercialization of agriculture, which was massively animal agriculture. So all these elements that we have now, all these problems we have, the inflammation or the arthritis, all these problems can be linked heavily to the fact that we consume animal products.
Are you sure that the studies are just wrongly not citing the fact that the the reason the American diet is so unhealthy is because of our high consumption of sugar.
No.
We consume so much sugar and carbohydrates, including the grains, the corns.
Yeah.
We know that the corn makes the animals fat.
Right.
That's why they give it to the animals.
Yeah.
So us eating the corn and the grains is going to make us fat and unhealthy.
Okay, what makes us fat is fat, and what's found in animal products is saturated fat and trans fat.
I wouldn't say that's true.
Carbohydrates
there's
can
studies.
carbohydrates can metabolize into fat in our bodies when we don't use them and burn them up like we should.
Carbohydrates,
But what
sugar.
yeah, exactly. What comes to our body is the fat, and animal products are full of saturated fat, trans fat, and cholesterol, which are the three things that clog our arteries and cause atherosclerosis and heart disease and all these problems that are actually our #1 killers of people here in the US. So
well, we can there's good fats and bad fats, okay?
Of course,
and we
always.
can sit here and argue all day about diet.
Yeah, we can.
And really, there are so many different conflicting studies out there on either side. And I would say that for a lot of people, I would say veganism, if it's something you want to do and try, go for it. I know that there are people who have gotten benefits from it because you are consuming mineral vitamin-rich stuff when you're doing the plant stuff as well.
Yeah.
But what I will say is this: it's not sustainable for long term for the entire global population. So that's kind of the place I'm standing at right now, and I still haven't heard anything that proves otherwise.
And I'd just like to say thank you for the conversation.
Yes.
I agree with many things that we said, but I disagree wholeheartedly with a lot of them.
Yes.
I believe that it is sustainable, and I would like to say I don't think you said anything that would reverse my opinion on that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
One
so
question.
Yeah.
Based on what you guys were just centered to your discussion, what does that have to do with this particular farm? Like,
Yeah,
why not a big industrial farm that's
okay, yeah. So
That's a
why
good
is
question.
this
Yeah, yeah.
why is this farm being targeted and not
Yeah.
some big industrial factory farm?
So we were at Case Farm Slaughterhouse earlier this morning. This is our second place today, and that place is a mass industrialized slaughterhouse where they bring factory farm chickens in. So this is just another side of the spectrum. But the bottom line for us is the slaughter, right? And these animals are all going to be slaughtered. So for us, morally, there isn't much difference between a factory farmed animal and say a locally organic family raised animal in the sense they're all going to be killed anyway. And that bottom line is they'll die and it's wrong because it's unnecessary. That's how I'd answer that question.
Okay, so then here, let me ask you your stance then on human abortion.
All right,
Because a lot of vegans tend to be a little bit more liberal, and they tend to be
that's right.
pro-abortion. So many Christians, ethically, morally, would say that that's wrong to kill a human being,
Yeah.
whether it's capable of sustaining itself alone outside the womb at that time in its gestation
Right,
or not.
right.
But how? What's your standpoint on that?
So I've been raised in the UK, and abortion isn't an issue in the UK because it's been legalised, I think, longer since I've been born. So for me, I don't see abortion as being an issue up to a certain point because, when a human baby is just a collection of cells, they're not a human baby in that sense. So I would say the life of the woman who has her own rights and has autonomy over her own body would
What
supersede
point
the
would
right
you
of
say
cells.
that it's not a human cell,
That's-
though?
And I don't know. That's the question, right? I don't know that.
Because currently we have up to 24 weeks, which is 6 months gestation. It
I
only
would-
gives 3 months left.
Yeah.
So would you say that that's immoral to kill a 20-week-old baby in the womb?
I don't know about the laws here, but I've heard that the laws that are often cited by the right wing are laws that are taken into place when the woman is in danger and her life is in danger. So I don't know. I can't comment on that, but that's what I do know is a lot of the people, especially from InfoWars on the right, would cite stuff that's
if the
extreme.
woman is not in danger, if there's
Right.
no risk to the woman's health,
Right.
Because they can still get abortions up to 24 weeks, whether or not you're in danger or anything. It's right now the woman can go choose to have the baby killed.
Right.
So you mentioned a lot morals and ethics,
Yeah.
and talking about killing a life. And your
Yeah.
main issue here is that they're going to be killing these cows for
Right,
meat.
right.
So how then can you justify killing a human in the womb?
Well, I would justify up to the point where the human baby is no longer becomes conscious or sentient, because then it's about that version of life that the human baby has. And I think the issue is, we have overpopulation, which is a huge issue that's going to affect us all. So, when we look at abortion, if we're going to let every baby that's born on this planet be born, then we're going to have huge issues of population continue to rise. And these people that are against abortions, the right wing, the evangelical Christians, they're totally against people having abortions, but as soon as that baby's born, they don't want to provide welfare or benefits or anything to look after the
So
baby.
you said when the baby becomes conscious or sentient,
But
then it would be wrong.
Right.
Would you say that these animals have the same consciousness and capability of consciousness that we do?
No, I wouldn't say that, but pigs, for instance, are as clever or have been proven to have the same cognitive abilities as a 3-year-old child, so they're more intelligent than a baby up to the age of 3, by scientific studies. So if you're going to go by intelligence and cognitive abilities, then a pig's life should be worth more than a newborn baby's life.
Okay, well, I don't know. I would say I definitely disagree with you on that
But that's
one.
science, right? That's science, so you can argue science, but that's...
agree.
Okay, that's
I would
what...
definitely disagree
No,
with
no,
that,
no,
because
but
if you look at the rate at which an animal ages,
Yeah.
the 3-year-old pig is nowhere
No,
near
no,
the rate at which a 3-year-old child ages. We
Right.
live a lot longer,
Yeah.
so you cannot compare the two. A 3-year-old pig can breed. A 3-year-old
Yeah.
child cannot.
Yeah, but you're basing our worth of life based on, cognitive abilities and intelligence, and I'm saying if that's what you want to
No,
do...
that's what you were doing by saying that
no, 'cause-
you wanted to think it's
No,
okay
because you-
to abort babies in
Right,
the womb
right.
if they don't have a consciousness
Yeah, if
or
they're not
cognitive
conscious.
ability
exactly,
yet.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So I feel like we've gone off tangent here on the abortion one because, like I said, like as long as
Because it's somewhat hypocritical when you say.
I don't think it's hypocritical. I'd also throw that back on you. So you say I'm a hypocrite for that. I'd say you're a hypocrite if you're against abortion, but you consume animals, because you're against abortion because you say it's not right to take a life, but then you take lives every day. So we're both hypocrites in that
Well,
sense.
because I would say, well, I will say this. My morals and ethics come from my Christian belief system. And what I
Yeah.
will say is that I do believe it's wrong to kill another human being.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to adhere and reference Christian
Yeah.
belief systems, I will say that it says so in our Bible that we should not kill other humans and man. But it also does say that God says eat meat sparingly. So he doesn't say don't eat meat, don't kill animals. He says he put them here for us to have and use.
Right.
So
do you think that a benevolent and compassionate God would be happy with us killing his animals if we didn't have to?
Well, I think that actually, if you want to get into the God in the Bible, Cain and Abel, Cain killed Abel because God didn't like that Cain brought him vegetables and fruits, and Abel brought him meats as a sacrifice.
Right.
So actually, God wanted him to make the sacrifice and kill the animal for him.
Right.
So,
but we don't do that anymore.
but what
Animal
I'm saying is
sacrifices aren't
that's what I'm
necessary
adhering
anymore.
to. My morals, my principles
Yeah.
adhere to Christianity.
Right. But animal
When
sacrifices
you're
aren't needed
referencing
anymore.
morals and ethics and
Yeah.
principles, if you're just going to say you're solely like an atheist and you believe in science and that we're no different animals,
I think we
wise,
are different.
if this is an animal kingdom, survival of the fittest,
Do you think that humans are animals?
I don't.
So what are we?
I believe that we're conscious beings here, that we were put here from God, and that essentially we have domain over these creatures. We're to love them, we're to respect
Okay.
them, and I will agree with you this. I don't think that some of these factory farms are right. But
Okay.
what I will say is this behind me doesn't seem to be
What about
a
this-
factory farm. It doesn't seem to be
Right.
torturing or putting these animals in inhumane conditions. Now, the houses where you have the chickens and they're like crammed together and they're pecking at each other and their legs are all messed up and they're being tortured, I would say that's wrong. I'd say look into that. I would say we should have some reform. I will agree with you on that. And I think many people who even consume meat will agree that we can push for more ethics and humane treatment of animals, and that we should look at more ways to humanely kill animals. It's interesting to notice that I don't see you guys outside, protesting outside of the Humane Society. The Humane Society
yeah, we
catches
do. Yeah, we
dogs
do.
and cats
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
put them down to sleep.
Yeah, yeah.
And they
But you
say
don't know
that
what we
that's,
do in other days,
but
right?
you say that that's humane.
No, I don't believe it's
They believe that it's humane to put the animals down
Yeah.
to sleep.
Right.
So I would say that there is a somewhat humane way to kill.
Okay.
We do it in prison systems when somebody has a death sentence. They
that's
have
humane,
lethal
right?
injection.
Yeah.
There's a humane way, and then there's a torture and gruesome way.
Right.
So what I will agree with you on is that we should definitely avoid the torture and gruesome and
Right.
mistreatment of animals.
And the way that we kill animals now, is that humane or torturous and gruesome?
It depends. It depends. There are
Okay.
some
It's just throat slitting,
places,
just standard throat slitting. Like we electrify them, or we put a ball in the head and we throat slit them.
or there's some that air pressure.
That's the
Yeah.
stunt. That's the captive bolt pistol
Yeah.
stuns them, right?
Yeah.
And then they hang upside down, cut the throat, which
Yeah.
kills them. Is that
Okay.
humane?
I'd say it's more humane than a lion kills
Okay.
their prey,
Okay,
right?
all right.
Because if you look
But
into
we're
how
going off
no,
tangents
if
now.
you
Yeah,
look
yeah.
at how lions kill their prey, you know what they go
Oh,
for
lions
first?
are brutal.
Oh, they go for the genitals. They eat the genitals first,
Yeah?
and then they eat them from their butthole out. They
Yeah.
literally eat their intestines out. So if you want to talk about humane,
yeah.
but you have no problem with the lions killing their prey, do you?
Why do lions kill their prey?
Because they eat them.
So because they're obligate carnivores and they have to survive. So again, why are we comparing ourselves to wild animals like we did to our ancestors? Animals, again, they rape and they kill and they do
What I'm
horrible
saying
things.
is, because you're saying we're animals, I'm saying out of the animals under your ideology,
Yeah.
we kill a lot more humanely than most other animals
I didn't
do.
ask you about more humane. I asked you, is it humane? So the answer is a yes or no. There isn't a more or less. Is the way that we kill animals now humane? Yes or no?
I would say I would say that some places probably don't.
Okay.
But I would say some places definitely
So let's just take the standard way that animals are killed. Let's say it's done absolutely to the letter of the law perfectly.
I would say quick and in a way that doesn't necessarily stress the animal out too much beforehand. Just quick and to the point.
What does the word humane mean?
In a way that takes into effect concern and care, and you're not trying to torture an animal. You know, I think the Native Americans probably, they had a very communicative relationship with the animals, and they respected and they honored the animals that they killed, and they did it in a way that they could just put it out of its misery shortly and be done with it, and they thanked the animal for its offering. So I think there are ways to be respectful. I think humanely has to do with also being respectful.
So the Native Americans, it's down to necessity again, but also the word humane, like objectively, means to have or show compassion or benevolence. So what we have to ask ourselves is the way that we kill animals compassionate or benevolent? Is it benevolent to cut the throat of an animal if they don't have to die? Is that benevolent or compassionate?
I think that I would say that's probably more of a humane way to kill an animal than
not more.
Eating it from its balls and genitals.
No, it is more humane than that, but is it compassionate or benevolent, which is what the word humane means? Is it compassionate?
I would say it's a compassionate way to kill, yeah.
So you believe that killing an animal unnecessarily is compassionate?
You asked me if the way in which to kill it was seemed as compassionate, and I would say that way is compassionate. So versus other ways that you could possibly kill it.
But you're doing this thing again when you're saying versus other ways, right? And it'd be more compassionate for me to shoot you in the head than to stab you 10 times, but it's still not a compassionate act for me to shoot you in the head, right? So you could.
Once again, you're going to try to adhere to Christian morals by saying that it's unethical to kill at all.
I'm just using the word of compassion.
It's not compassionate at all to kill another creature for animal. But what I'm trying to say is you can have compassion in the way you kill. But what I'm trying to say
not when it's unnecessary. You can't compassionately kill someone if it's unnecessary.
Well, in most cases it is necessary.
But we've already talked about this.
We eat meat.
Yes, but it's not a necessity. We don't have to. There's millions of vegans all around the world that show that
we'd have to implement a massive global system of production
the system's
that would
already in
invade
place.
the rights of many nations and countries.
We're invading the rights of nations already.
You would have to essentially have eminent domain and steal a bunch of arable land.
But that's what we're doing already. 82% of starving children live in countries where food is grown to feed livestock animals in the West. So we're going to countries where there's people in impoverishment and dying of starvation, and we're taking that food away from them, bringing it to this country so that we can engage in our selfish desires, right? So that's already happening. People in Brazil where the Amazon rainforest has been destroyed, you've got Brazilian tribal people being displaced,
but hold on. A little while ago, you were saying that I know and I have to take responsibility for the animals that are killed during the production of agriculture, and that's okay. So you think that that's morally okay to kill those animals in the production of agriculture because it's something that we need to do to survive and it's an inevitability. But when I say that I think it's morally okay to kill the animal for the meat, you say that somehow that's different.
So the issue is then when you raise an animal for meat, you're not only killing the animal, but that animal has to be fed the food that we feed to them, which means that many more animals are killed in the production of their crops, which means that on a non-vegan diet, we're still responsible for more of those animals being killed, which means as a vegan, I'm responsible for less of those animals being killed. Yes, it's not perfect.
And that's if the animals are fed grains. If they're grass-fed cows, if they're wild, free-range chickens, it's not necessarily the same.
And we cannot fit everyone's demand or consumption of animal products with grass-fed animals. It's not possible. People are still going to eat chickens and pigs, which are factory-farmed and always will be factory-farmed, which means that these crops will always be grown and fed to them. And the amount of grass-fed beef that people eat is very small in proportion compared to the amount of factory-farmed beef where people are
what do you think would be a little bit more of a middle ground or more realistic thing to try to advocate for, other than just banning all meat in slaughterhouses?
So again, I'm not advocating for the banning of meat. I'm advocating for people to make more ethical choice in their life, which over time will mean that the need for meat is redundant and unnecessary. I'm not looking to laws to change people. I'm hoping to change people's mindsets and encourage them to choose a more compassionate, that word compassion again, an ethical way of living. So it's not about banning stuff. It's about bringing a gradual shift over time, which allows us as a species, an intelligent species, to adapt and conquer the issues that problem, that kind of new world will face as we go along that journey. But the world that we will get at the end of it is more sustainable, it's more compassionate, and it's also more healthy as well.
And it's more of a globalist-run government.
This is where it always boils down to. It's this kind of like neoconservative idea.
But it would have to be. It would have to be a
globalist,
organized
no, it
system.
doesn't.
It would. Tons of international trade.
It cannot be more so than it is now.
You couldn't do it without
international trade. You have
international
corporations and capitalist governments all over the world going to war.